Hello and welcome to the Middle East Institute webinar on Israel-Jordan relations, marking the 30th anniversary of the peace treaty between the two countries. My name is Nimrod Goren. I'm the Senior Fellow for Israeli Affairs at the Institute, and I'm joined here together by four distinguished speakers from both Israel and Jordan: Colonel Reserve Ron Schatzberg, Ambassadors retired Omar Rifai, Smadar Peri, and Yana Abu Taleb, all of them with a lot of experience on Israel-Jordan relations throughout years of work and in different disciplines. The two countries have signed a treaty 30 years ago, and the reality that we had back then in 1994 is quite different than the one we have now, both on the bilateral level, on the peace process aspect, on the regional dimension. Israel-Jordan relations had lots of ups and downs during the decades, but now they are during one of the toughest periods for them, a period that is characterized by a stagnation in the peace process, by a war in Gaza, by tensions between the two countries on issues of settlements in Jerusalem. Not the best of times during Israel-Jordan relationship, but still, even at this challenging period, the strategic importance of this relationship enables the resilience of some sort of cooperation where national interests are at stake, whether it's on security, on water, on natural gas, even on humanitarian aid delivery to Gaza. So interests are at play, but the relationships are so different from the warmth, from the hope, from even the euphoria that was characterizing the first days when Prime Minister Rabin and King Hussein were signing the peace treaty that was enabled after decades of secret relationship between the countries, after the development of strong personal bonds between the leaders, after a breakthrough in Israeli-Palestinian peace process during the 1993 Oslo Accords, and with a lot of hope for joint bilateral and regional projects. We'll try to understand today with our guests what really happened to this relationship and where they might go next. We'll try to first evaluate what went well, what succeeded, both at the beginning in the early days that were very positive in nature, but also what still succeeds today despite the hardships and why. We'll try to take a look at what went wrong. Why are we so far away today from the hopes that we had at the beginning? And what is the specific impact of the war in Gaza on this relationship? And finally, trying to inject some optimism into the future of these relations, we'll try to assess what could be done in the next steps in order to somehow improve the ties. It's quite rare to have Israeli and Jordanian speakers attending and speaking at the same event these days. The 30th anniversary events around the peace treaty did not really enable that to happen, so I appreciate the speakers coming together and being here. Thank you for that. We also are able, through your expertise, to discuss issues related to diplomacy, to security, to media, to public outreach, to civil society, to environment. These are all the fields that you are working on, and it's great that we could learn from you on that. This event is part of a broader initiative within the Middle East Institute that looks at Arab relations within the context of attempts to promote two-state solution and Israeli-Palestinian peace. We have been engaging this year in similar webinars on Israel-Egypt relations, on Israel-Turkey relations, on prospects for Israel-Saudi normalization. So it's good that Israel-Jordan relations, which are very important, are also within this cluster. We will go in different rounds of conversations among us. The audience can feel free to ask questions during the chat, and with the limited time that we have, I'll try to integrate those into the discussion that we have. Thank you also for the staff of MEI for enabling this to happen, and I think we are ready to go. And we'll start by the positive side of things, of what went well, or what is still going well in Israel-Jordan relationship, and perhaps the most natural individual to start with is you, Ambassador Rifai, because you were appointed as ambassador to Israel back in 1996, very shortly after the peace agreement was signed, and you were on the ground in Israel at a time of a lot of hope, a lot of positivity, but your engagement on the topic did not end back then, and still until today. You're engaged also through the MEI policy dialogue channel that we have, with efforts to improve the relationship and promote peace. So Ambassador Rifai, let's start with you. What do you think has been going good in relation between Israel and Jordan along the years?
At the beginning, allow me to thank you, Nimrod, and the Middle East Institute in Washington for hosting us today and inviting me among this distinguished group of colleagues and to discuss the Jordanian-Israeli relationship of peace in 30 years on. I would like, before I start, just to give a brief recap of the treaty itself. I think the audience would appreciate hearing the main points. The treaty itself was signed on October 26, 1994, at the southern border crossing of Wadi Araba. It guaranteed Jordan the restoration of its occupied land, about 380 square kilometers, as well as an equitable share of water from the Yarmouk and Jordan rivers. Most importantly, the treaty defined Jordan's western borders for the first time clearly and conclusively, putting an end, as we believed then, to the false claim that Jordan is Palestine. Of course, today we're hearing voices from the Israeli side, specifically among officials, of a recontinuation of this false claim, which is totally unacceptable to Jordan. The main goal of the treaty was to lay a firm foundation for a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace, and thus outlining a number of areas in which negotiations would continue. To this end, negotiators signed a series of protocols establishing a mutually beneficial framework of relations in fields such as trade, transportation, tourism, communications, energy, culture, security, science, navigation, the environment, and health and agriculture. A total of 30 articles were created, and this was the start of the peace process. As such, the treaty was meant to be a people-to-people peace, and not just a country-to-country one. It was hoped it would be a warm peace. Since I was personally in Israel at that time, I witnessed firsthand how people in Israel were ecstatic about peace with Jordan. They had a true feeling of finally being accepted and recognized in the region, and especially by the Arab country with the longest border. Indeed, the mere fact that they could now get in a car and drive to another country for the first time in history was for them somewhat of an unbelievable achievement. And people in Jordan for the first time felt that perhaps the future would be better, that this was the beginning of a real process that would lead to the two main elements of peace as they saw it, namely the Jordanians would be better off as well, and that the Palestinian state would finally be created. But unfortunately and sadly, these hopes never materialized, and the dreams of yesterday turned into the nightmares of today. But perhaps this is something we'll get to a little later in our discussion. What went well, you ask, Nimrod? I'm not going to say what went well during the process. I'm going to say what went well to create the treaty itself. Why did it happen? What were the positive elements? And I will go through them one by one as I see them. I believe there was an honest and strong leadership relationship between the two countries. There was a commitment of the negotiating team to make things work. There was a desire to end this conflict and build a constructive future rather than a destructive past, to leave something better for our children than what we got. Basically, to live in peace. Obviously, the geographic proximity of both nations facilitated contact and meetings. But there was a strong belief by all who were concerned in this operation that we were on the right track and, more importantly, on the right side of history. Also, I believe that we had a US administration in Washington that understood both sides of the argument, and most significantly, that there were two sides to the argument as well. This is a very important thing that I think we're lacking nowadays, that there are two sides to an argument that must be appreciated. And the whole region was in an era and area of negotiation. Egypt had signed its treaty 15 years before. The Palestinians had the Oslo process. There was even a Syrian-Israeli negotiation going on in Geneva with Clinton being the intermediary. So Jordan did not want to be left out. His late Majesty King Hussein said, and I quote, "If we don't decide for ourselves, we will be decided for. So it was the right time for Jordan to go for it. And we did. And the treaty was established. And as I explained, it was established in a positive atmosphere. We were all very hopeful. Unfortunately, today it's a different story, but we'll get to that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rifai, for setting the stage and pointing out the regional context that was so conducive to this process between Israel and Jordan to move forward, but also the public aspect of it, because the Israeli image on Arab countries has not been traditionally very positive, but towards King Hussein and Jordan, from the very early days, it was different. And I turn to you, Smadar, because you were there, you were visiting the King's Palace, and you were doing interviews on behalf of Israel's leading media outlets, and you were conveying the messages from Amman to the Israeli public, and also shaping how the Israeli public understood those relationships. So what did go well in terms of the public outreach, the media relation, your experiences from those years and beyond?
Let me go a few hours ago today and tell you, I don't know if you are aware of it, but an ex-member of parliament in Jordan, Imad El-Adwan, was arrested for trying to ship weapons and gold into the West Bank in order that they will be used against us in Israel. He was convicted today to 10 years in prison in Jordan. His membership of the parliament was taken from him. And I think that I can see something positive in it, because if there is a will to continue, not now, but someday, then it's an example, a good example for us to see that Jordan is not one side, but Jordan is more complex and they have their own problems. This is number one. Number two, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I can say it because I'm a journalist, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a politician, I'm not a military person, but I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu missed the point. Jordan was always the youngest sister of the state of Israel. And since the days of Prime Minister Rabin, we used to treat Jordan like this. And the relationship flourished at a certain time, but since Netanyahu came to power, this is not existing anymore.
And Smadar, can you tell us something from those early visits in the Jordanians' capital and palace, and the messages that were extended to the Israeli public and society at the time?
I can say that my relationship with the late King Hussein started years before everything, before peace, before negotiations, before anything. I used to send him letters twice a year. Whenever I went to England or France, I used to send letters. I didn't have his address, but I said, His Majesty, King Hussein, the Royal Palace, Amman, Jordan, and this is it. And I sent the letter. I never expected any answer. I didn't know if he received the letters or not. But once I came to see the king for the first time, 3 days before the peace agreement was signed, he showed me all the letters. It was unbelievable. And I think that I had a very special relationship with His Majesty. And then one day when Prime Minister Ehud Barak was visiting Aqaba to see the new king, King Abdallah, I was standing outside with a colleague of mine from Jordan, and all of a sudden a military man came and he asked my colleague, where is Smadar? Can you show me who is Smadar? She was pointing at me, and I was invited into the villa in Aqaba. And then an hour later, the king and his brother came into the room, and they said, the king said to his brother, I want to show you the journalist who established such good relationship with our father. This is it. This is the whole story.
Thank you for sharing. It shows the power.
But you know, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Lately, I was trying to go to Jordan. My office was asking me as a journalist to go to Jordan, and I called a very good friend of mine in Amman, and he said, "Don't come. Don't come." And he said for the first time, "And if you insist on coming, don't call me."
Yeah, and we'll get soon to try and understand why this is the case, but I think your first story indicated the power of journalism in fostering neighborly relations and peace between peoples. But you also mentioned issues of security and stability, more recent one, and I want to turn to you, Ron, because you're coming from a security background, but also in terms of various track 2 channels that you have managed and led throughout the years with Israeli and Jordanian security officials. So in terms of security, what went well in the relationship between the countries? What are the interests that still bridge them together?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. You know, usually we speak about the bad things. When we meet Jordanian Israelis who deal with the bilateral relations, we are happy to go into the downsides. But I would like to highlight some of the I would say achievements of this peace agreement, and I will try to find. I will focus on 5 points, and then maybe a story that might give some hope. I'm starting with the trust. I think that what we have on the security apparatuses is a very unique trust between the sides, between the leaders of the security apparatuses, and that's not only in recent years. Along the last 30 years, the heads of the security apparatuses in Jordan and Israel, because of the shared interest of the kingdom and the state of Israel, I think found ways to trust each other, and this is something very quite unique, I think, in our region. Second point that I want to mention is the borders. You know, Israel has the longest border with Jordan, is 309 kilometers. And Jordan has also its own challenges along its borders with Syria, with Iraq. And I think borders in general brought the two sides to cooperate and to coordinate in a very high level. And that includes the fact that Israel enjoy for the last 30 years from the quietest border in all our region, in all our country, is the eastern border with Jordan. And that's because the good work and the good actions of the Jordanian army, the responsibility, the professionalism of this army that allow us to leave or to make sure that basically we have a very small, number of troops along our border, and that's because Jordan is doing a very good job for our security. The third thing is that basically Jordan continued to be a very important, I wouldn't say mediator, but a factor in easing and the tensions in the most explosive point in the Middle East and maybe in the world. And then I mean Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount. And Jordan, with its leadership of the Waqf and keep on mediating and negotiating for the needs of Muslims and rights of the Muslims in this very important point. And the fact that we continue to have this dialogue and between officials on both sides, and I know that this is it's also a very soft point with the Jordanians, that Israel is not doing enough to cater the needs of Jordan and the Jordanian Waqf in this spot. But the mere fact that there is a channel of dialogue, and there is a dialogue between security and between diplomats, officials, and it's quite crucial for keeping this very explosive point, neutralizing the potential there. Last thing is the recent two attacks on Israel the 13th, 14th of April and the 1st of October attacks from Iran that basically showed that if the region comes together, and if Jordan and Israel and the UAE and other countries in this region come together, we can deal with this aggression by Iran. And for us, it's quite clear that Jordan is the cornerstone for any peace with the Palestinians, because if Jordan, God forbid, falling into the scenario that we see of countries like Syria or Iraq, we can be sure that there will be no Palestinian state, and that's what we hope for in understanding that the peace agreement need to be signed between the two sides, between Israel and Palestine. And I think that for us, it's quite clear, for those who are dealing with track 2 diplomacy and backtrack negotiations, it's quite clear that without Jordan, there will be no, without Jordan strong and stable, there will be no solution for the Palestinian issue or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Middle East. So that's the 5 points. And I want to end up with a story. Like 10 years ago, I was leading with my Jordanian partner a delegation of Israeli and Jordanian soldiers from the '67 war that went into the fighting areas together, marking 45 years for the Israeli and Jordan last war. And the amount of, I would say, respect and dignity that both sides showed each other was a sign that old combatants of this conflict are the best candidate to be those who pay the price for the wars, are those who understand better why we need peace between the sides. And that was a quite moving moments in Ammunition Hill in Jerusalem, hearing and seeing the flags there of both nations, and hearing the anthems of both nations. So that's something that left me with some hope for future.
Thank you very much, Ron. And again, you touch upon the people dimension, and that's a very good entry point to you, Yana, because coming from civil society and kind of creating the structure, EcoPeace, which you'll explain a bit what it is, quite early on in the peace relations, established a model of an organization that has Jordanians, Palestinians, and Israelis working together towards a shared interest, in your case, the environment. That's a very inspiring model. So please tell us a bit about that and how it worked throughout the decades.
Well, thank you very much, Nimrod, to start with, and thank you to our distinguished speakers as well. It's an honor to be joining you today. There is so much happening around us now that makes us feel that things look hopeless. But I think it's during these difficult times that people like us who understand that cooperation is the way forward, that will allow us to move forward. I represent the voice of civil society. I'm a Jordanian that is directing an organization that brings together Jordanian, Israeli, and Palestinian environmental peace builders that have seen, since the signing of the peace treaty, the greatness and the opportunities of what we can do all together. But I've also seen that if we do not focus on our shared identities together, then we have so much to lose. And we're seeing the consequences during our days now. So just to give a little bit of context, Nimrod. So we heard both Ambassador Rifai and Colin and Ron speak about security issues, speak about the leadership that was there before signing of the peace treaty. And we know that both countries had a vested interest even before the signing in securing our shared borders and the overall stability of our two countries. from our perspective as a civil society organization, added value of the signing of the peace treaty is a de jure status that made cross-border cooperation between willing individuals, and I say willing, because it's important to understand that it was not an easy process because it was lacking the people aspect. But it also, it enabled us as people and groups to make that personal choice of cooperation, and it was protected by law. So environmental cooperation was a neutral theme that is legitimate, that we all know that we need to work together. Otherwise, we will not see the mutual gain of protecting our shared environment, our shared resources. And that was the essence of establishment of EcoPeace Middle East 30 years ago. We're now this year celebrating our 30th anniversary. But I want to go and stick to the positive side to start with. And EcoPeace is what worked well. EcoPeace and that platform that brought not only decision makers together, but people on the ground, people that understand that we have a shared environment, we have shared resources, and we must work together on protecting them. So I think that is the best highlight, that EcoPeace was established and continues to be there to bring people together, to work together on protecting the shared environment. Important issues that we worked on from the beginning are the water issues, basically. So if I can give a very quick example, we know that the Israeli side and the Jordanian side for many years worked on moving forward with the Red Dead Canal project. We as a civil society organization had many objections on the Red Dead itself. But it wasn't only about objection. We provided more viable, feasible alternatives, such as the water energy nexus vision, not only for Israel and Jordan, but to also include Palestine, that would enable all of us in our three countries to see economic prosperity, geopolitical stability, security, basically for all our people. And we saw that the pre-feasibility study that we had created as an organization on a water energy nexus for our region being translated and advanced into a memorandum of understanding that was signed between Israel, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates. So water is a very good example. Energy is another, and achieving security on these issues are in the essence of what went well, basically. The last point that I want to highlight is the education, because a big component that we work on as an organization is an educational track, whereby we provided cross-border visits, engaging teachers, youth, climate diplomats to learn about the shared environment and the necessity for all of us to cooperate. They were able, through the cross-border visits that we did with them in Jordan, in Israel, in Palestine, to see firsthand the effects of the realities of our situation in terms of water, in terms of energy, in terms of what has happened to our shared resources, basically, our dying Dead Sea, how our Jordan River turned from a mighty Jordan River many decades ago into a small trickle. But most importantly, it empowered them to understand that there's no way forward but to work together to be able to save and protect our shared resources. And with this, I'll stop.
Thank you. So we are 30 minutes into our discussion. We heard quite a bit of positive things about the potential of the relationship, the spirit of peace, the shared interest, the type of interaction and cooperation that happened. But now we are very far away from that, and it's also reflected in some of the questions that we are getting in the Q&A as we speak about how can countries trust each other and whether this cold peace could be a model for the region. So let's go a bit now into the problems, the unfulfilled potential. And I think some of you already mentioned the lack of trust between leadership and the Palestinian issue. Let's go a bit deeper on that and start with you, Ambassador Rifai. What didn't go well? What are we missing? What have actually even failed in this relationship? And how does the recent war in Gaza impact all of that?
Thank you, Nimrod. I think the Jordanian-Israeli relationship had its golden days in the first year, from the time the treaty was signed to the unfortunate assassination of the late Prime Minister Rabin. And after that, I know, Smadar, you said you can speak freely as a journalist. Myself, as a retired diplomat, I'm going to speak freely. I think with the election of Prime Minister Netanyahu back in 1996, things took a turn for the worst. And that was the start of the downhill slide in the relationship and in the treaty. The election of Netanyahu brought together a government who never really wanted peace with the Palestinians. And in the case of the Jordanian-Israeli relationship, peace with the Palestinians means the creation of a Palestinian state. And this is a core demand of not just Jordan, but of most of the countries of the world. And Prime Minister Netanyahu's first government in 96 came to power with the goal of blocking the Oslo process and making the future of a Palestinian state impossible. Settlement building, mass arrests, an occupation state of the Palestinians. This would definitely affect Jordan. And Jordan's relationship with Israel, I think any Arab relationship with Israel, has also given due power to the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians. So we have a new government in Israel 1 year after peace, or 1.5 years after the peace treaty, which is set to put blocks up in the road, not find solutions. The election of Netanyahu, Netanyahu back in 1996, I was ambassador in Tel Aviv. And it was clear that Netanyahu would never accept a Palestinian state. I believe he wanted to go down in history as the prime minister who prevented the creation of Palestine rather than facilitated it. And fast forward till today, you can see that in action. But Netanyahu in those days was considered on the right of the political spectrum. Today, 30 years on, Israeli society has moved to the right. Netanyahu is now considered a moderate compared to some of his colleagues. So I think we have a problem with Prime Minister Netanyahu and company, and we have a problem with Israeli society. Back in 96, when peace was not moving, you would have 400,000 people demonstrating in the streets of Tel Aviv, in Rabin Square, saying peace now. There was a peace camp. So today we don't have an Israeli peace camp. Of course, we don't have a Jordanian peace camp because of what's happening in Gaza, and I'll get to that. But we don't have an Israeli peace camp. I don't know where they went. No one is talking peace in Israel. The only peace overtures and comments are coming from the Arab side, not from the Israeli. From the Israeli side, unfortunately, and this is clear on the ground, we wake up every morning, the Israelis are thinking who to kill today in terms of Lebanese or Gazans. In the Arab world, we wake up and we say, where is peace? Where is an end to all of this? So I think Israeli society and politics have moved to the right, and that's a negative. Palestinian statehood has been blocked. I cannot see it feasible today. If you look at the West Bank, there is no way you can have a Palestinian state with all the Israeli settlements there and settlers. And I think there's no peace camp on either side to push for peace. You have also the rise of what I call political religion on both sides. On both sides, I think the religious parties have taken the high ground and are more or less calling the narrative. And therefore, you have society which is really not interested in peace. I think, in Jordan today, I do not believe you can find one person who will say, I am interested in peace with Israel. There is no one. And if you look at what's happening in reality on the ground, is this a country fighting for peace? So, I mean, we have a problem there. I think also the world has got fed up of the problem in the Middle East. There are other problems, China, Ukraine, and they're taking more attention, I believe, now. And I mean, it looks very bleak. Gaza is, of course, an unbelievable catastrophe. We're not seeing just a war. We're seeing massacres. Massacres complete. This is not war. This cannot be war. And if you look at Lebanon, it's a repeat of Gaza. So I think all of this is affecting the mood, of course, in the Arab world, but in Jordan specifically, of saying this is not peace, we don't want it. So we had that 1 year, 30 years ago. And then, Netanyahu has been more or less prime minister since, give or take 1 or 2 times. And he's calling the shots his way, and the world is watching. And nothing is happening. So I'm not very optimistic, I'm afraid, in that sense. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar, for sharing and for being open on that. And Smadar, I turn to you, and maybe you can relate a bit also to the question of the Israeli sentiment towards peace that Ambassador Rifai referred to. And we also have a question about, and we speak about Netanyahu, the incident in which he was welcoming the Israeli security guard that shot in the incident in Amman. So how did that impact? So over to you, Smadar.
I was listening very carefully to what Ambassador Rifai was saying, and I don't have much to add to it because I fully agree with him. This is number one. I think that the two sides have committed too many mistakes along the years, but these mistakes could be, we could overcome, and even the Jordanians could overcome. But I think that Israel lost interest. When I say Israel, I mean Netanyahu. He lost interest in Jordan. This is a very big problem. And there is no opposition in Israel. I mean, no opposition which is standing in front of Netanyahu and giving him conditions or saying, do this or do that, and will say, who is the opposition in Israel? There is only one voice now. And I think that one more point which I would like to point at is that for an Israeli interest, it's very, very important that Jordan will be strong. And Israel is not doing anything to help Jordan to do something which could be done. Even, for example, I'll take the problem of water. Why did Israel decide to cut it into half of the quantity of water? There were agreements which were signed between the two countries, and they are not taking place anymore. And there are businessmen from Jordan and from Israel who are competing with selling their goods to the West Bank. I mean, there is no mutual language between the two countries taking place now, and this is a very big problem.
One perhaps to add a word, just so you know, within the public opinion in Israel, and that's a consequence of polls being done every year by the Mitvin think tank, there is an overwhelming support in the Israeli public of maintaining the good relation with Jordan, even though there is no support of the two-state solution. Support is going down. So Jordan still is being seen as some of strategic asset. And when Netanyahu, and there was a change in government, and Bennett and Lapid came to power, one of the key arguments they made, also President Herzog, was the need to improve the ties with Jordan. So again, there are different views within Israel on how these ties.
I think that all Israeli prime ministers, except for Netanyahu, they had their own thoughts about relations with Jordan, on the defense, on the culture, on everything. And then when Netanyahu is there for 16 years, nothing is going on.
Thank you, Smadar. Ron, over to you. Also taking into account one of the questions that we had in the Q&A box about if the current policies of the Israeli government towards the Palestinians continue, will it lead to an eventual breakdown of the Israeli-Jordan peace treaty? Do you see such a challenge ahead of us as you try to explain us what, from your perspective, didn't go very well in ties until now?
So I think, first of all, that if I'm trying to summarize all the problems regarding the relations, from the Israeli point of view, I would say that the main problem is that Israel is taking Jordan for granted. That's been the case for too long.
Yes.
In the sense that Israeli leaders think, oh, the Jordan needs us anyway, so we can be, we don't need to be so delicate with them. And not, if you continue with this thinking, Israel is not doing enough to put down some of the thinking of Watan al-Badil and all this aspect of, that Jordan will be Palestine in the end. This is the kind of thing that we hear from extreme right in Israel, which are not put to the by the leaders to say this is wrong and this is very good for both people. And I think that in this regard, you have many in the right wing in Israel who think this way, which is very dangerous thinking, and not speaking about it all the time. But this notion, I think, is very, very, very detrimental for the relations between the two sides. We understand that the future of Jordan, the strength of Jordan, and the strength of Israel depends, in my belief, in creating a prosperous Palestinian state after agreed, of course, agreement between the sides. But I want to refer to what Ambassador Rifai said, and I don't accept what he said about that Israel is asking itself every day who to kill today. I'm referring back to the event that started in October 7th. I remind all of us that it started with Hamas at vicious and brutal attack on civilians, and I remind you that in the northern border, we didn't start a war with Hezbollah. Hezbollah started a war with us to support the Palestinian cause in Gaza. So we responded, and you can argue about our response, but I think we didn't ask ourselves how to fight and how to kill, who to kill today. So this is very important because I think we need to be fair with each other, and for me, it's quite a critical point. I want to refer to some of the points that, and I will try to put the links between security and economics. And we have a lot of problems that, because of this situation, that there are so many links that are natural links between security and economy. And but Israel is not doing enough to the Jordanian interest and to the Israeli interest in this regard. So just for example, the whole issue of visas. If a Jordanian wants a visa to visit in Israel, he goes through a nightmare of process that because of the security cause or because of security idea or or considerations, Israel is doing a very wrong in this regard, and make the Jordanian feel alienated towards the whole process and towards the idea of visiting in Israel. And that's not the case on the other side. When we go to Jordan, we don't face the same difficulties as the Jordanian face when they come to Israel, and you can justify it with many security arguments. But at the end of the day, if Israel want to have a good neighbor on the other side, we need to meet each other, we need to know each other, and this will not be achieved if the visa processes will not be changed. Then it bring me to the whole crossing issues. So crossings between Israel and Jordan, the economic crossing like Sheikh Hussein, and the crossing between Jordan and the West Bank in Allenby, they are not functioning in its full capacity, and they are not functioning because of the security cause, and we have a very limited number of trucks that can go on a daily basis. And I was in this process of bringing the Turkish trucks and Jordanian trucks to cross through Israel when like 12 years ago, in 2011-12. I was very much involved in this with my Jordanian partners in this effort, and we managed to bring hundreds of trucks crossing from Turkey to Jordan, from Jordan to Turkey, and it was the first time when Israel was, a traffic state or a transit state that basically allowed goods to cross like it used to be ages ago. And now we have another example that there's so many opportunities that as alternative to the Suez Canal, which is needed now. And if you go now to Sheikh Hussein Bridge, you'll see hundreds of trucks queuing on the Jordanian side, not able to cross on a quick manner, quickly to the other side to cater the needs of the Palestinians, the Israelis, the Jordanians, and those who can take their goods from the sea, from Haifa and Ashdod to wherever in the world. So this is something that I think the economic and security are tied together. If we will not do things about it, we will, and this brings me back to the expectations. The expectations of the peace process and the peace agreement between Jordan and Israel on the Jordanian side, on the economic side, were huge. And the failure or the disappointment was seemingly very huge. And this is something we have to change. I want to end up with, I think the last point would be that if we will not find, and that's the main problem that we have between the two sides, the main problem of the relations between the two sides in the Palestinian problem or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, if we will not solve that, the potential, there's a very low glass ceiling of the potential relations between the two sides. I'm afraid that's the case after so many years of doing, track two attempts to solve all kind of problems on the economic side, on the security side. And I hope that Netanyahu will not think that what he had in April 13th, 14th, and October 1st, that Jordan played a very important role, according to international media, in assisting the protection of this region. I hope he will not take it again for granted. I really hope that it will be credited and understood that this is the way forward, and this is not to bypass the Palestinian issue. This is, Palestinians need to be part of that, and they can be part, and very positive part. So there will be no Watan al-Badil, and there will be no alternative homeland, and there will be 3 prosperous and secured and dignified states, Palestine and Jordan and Israel.
Thank you. Yana, over to you. And when you discuss the hardship in the space of civil society, can you also relate on the pushback and boycotts that exist within Jordan on cooperation with Israelis, and how that made an impact on your work, at least?
So it's an impossible situation, Nimrod, like Ambassador Omar said. But if we really want to understand what went wrong, we have to trace back to how things evolved leading to the peace treaty, I think. So if we all remember when delegations began to arrive in Madrid peace conference, the Jordanians and Palestinians were merged into one delegation. Considering the historical context, of course, of the West Bank and it being under Jordanian control in 1967. But separating the two triggered frames of reference, a new reference, the UN Resolution 242, which became a basis for peace with Jordan and a base for future negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which is, as we all know now, the two-state solution. But when the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians through the Oslo failed, I must say, and went nowhere, and violence started erupting, the effects on civil society started being devastating, and things started to become really difficult. And it began to strengthen other kinds of activism that we see that are not so civil, I must say. And less and very far away from being having the non-governmental status. So we saw that settlements began to spread out of control, but also the BDS became the most popular non-governmental movement. So we as a civil society and EcoPeace being an important player in the region, started to have to really focus our work with decision makers, our governments, to advance cross-border initiatives like the water energy nexus, based on the same frame of reference that they agreed upon. All of our projects are based on internationally recognized borders as an organization and the two-state solution. So it's the same de jure status that the peace treaty had created and allowed organizations like ours to exist, but not only to operate and to be able to advocate. So when central governments became weak, we started seeing that irrational non-state actors started taking control. What did we expect would happen? So I think that compromising the two-state solution was not limited to only settlement expansion, but to new political initiatives that stripped the two-state solution from its essence. If we all remember when Trump came to office the first time, the Peace and Prosperity Initiative advocated for the Israeli annexation of the Jordan Valley, stripping any future Palestinian state from having borders with Jordan and from controlling natural resources such as water and agricultural land. It was obvious that Jordan was not happy and did not see that peace with Israel will continue. To end, we all know that the devastating effects of October 7th stopped so many opportunities from happening. The water energy nexus exchange that I talked about was so important to happen for so many different factors, is currently halted. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. But then the levels of destruction in Gaza, Lebanon, and the trauma that the Jewish people are enduring, and I see my colleagues on the Israeli side, what they have to go through on a daily basis as well, makes the worst climate change crisis that we all know is there and will not go away because we're not even giving it any attention, but it makes it pale in compromise of the human suffering that is happening. It's definitely very difficult at this time to move forward any environmental action or having it being taken seriously under the current circumstances. I cannot imagine myself starting to talk about the effects of the war on the shared environment and what people would think of me. I think all these issues went really wrong. We missed those good opportunities that we started with.
Thank you, Yana. We have time for a short round that can maybe merge the two. The first two, acknowledging all the difficulties, all the failures, the grim reality that we have on the ground as we speak, but also looking back at what enabled the positive progress to be made. If we combine that and look forward realistically, what one or two concrete things could be done to improve even a bit the relation between we see the big political change, I think that you all reflected to as a necessity for a breakthrough in ties. And on that, we had some questions that I want to relate in the Q&A, at least mention them, about whether other countries could help, whether someone mentioned the UAE, could it be beneficial to improvement of Israel-Jordan relations? Someone asked whether if Israel really changes course towards peace with the Palestinians, will there be a real change in the Jordanian mindset towards Israel, a real openness towards that? There was also a question about comparing the peace with Jordan to other peace treaties and normalization agreements that Israel had. So we don't have lots of time, so many questions will be left unanswered this time. But please take 2 minutes each, maybe 3, but really not more. What you think those who are committed to the idea of peace, who want to see improvement, what realistically can we do under such a conditions as we see them today? And Omar, I will begin with you.
Thank you, Nimrod. I think in answer to your question, how do you make things right? The quickest and easiest answer is change the Netanyahu government. And that's in the hands of the Israelis. If Israel changes government and brings in people who want to make peace, not just to have war, I'm sure things will get back to a kind of normalcy. Ron, I just want to answer one question you said. I think we need to clarify that the 7th of October in Gaza, the 8th of October from Lebanon, was not the start of this crisis or the cause of it. The cause of it goes back a number of years. Continuation of the Israeli occupation of Arab land. I mean, the problem is the occupation, not the reaction to the problem. You see, so I think, once Israel believes, the UN formula has always been, and the peace treaties between the Arab world and Israel, Egyptian, Jordanian, land for peace. And therefore, it's a simple equation. Israel has to withdraw from Palestinian lands. If it does not, then it's always going to be an occupier. And as an occupier, the people under occupation have a right to resist and to fight. And we can't cause that the problem. No, the problem is the occupation. I think the larger problem I see, and this is my final comment, is that Israel today has to decide, is it Israel in the Middle East or is it Israel and the Middle East? If it's in the Middle East, it has to act as a member of the community of the region. If it's and the Middle East, then it wants to be like Cyprus. It will build up walls and exclude itself from the region around it. My fear is that Israel wants to be and the Middle East. It does not want to be part of the Middle East. If it does, it would not go around in this violent way with its immediate neighbors. So I leave it at that. And inshallah, hope for the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Rifai. I think from an Israeli point of view, the idea that there are reactions to the occupation that are totally legitimate and should be condemned, is where Israelis are when they look at October 7th specifically. But maybe Ron could answer. So Smadar, over to you.
I'm listening to all of you, and I think that there is one problem. We all speak with the same voice and same facts. And I think that the Israelis and the Jordanians are sharing the same views. There is nobody from the extreme right or even from the right present here. And this is a problem because I share my point of view with Ron, with Ambassador Rifai, with the lady, I don't remember her name, and it's the same. I mean, what can be done? I think that with Netanyahu, nothing can be done. I'm sorry to say this.
Yeah, I think the fact that the people that you mentioned that have this shared positive perspective are still engaging and trying to publicly debate these issues, maybe that's also an action that could be done and fostered at these times.
I also believe and think, and I also believe that it's for our interest that the Jordanian palace will be holding the and not Palestinian state. We have to agree with the Jordanians on the situation in the West Bank and in Gaza, because now it's combined, and we have to look for it. But as I'm saying, it cannot take place at the era of Netanyahu. The problem is that there is no other candidate.
Go on, continue. Thank you, Smidan.
So I think we face, and I want to put on the agenda, two main challenges for the near future on the bilateral relations. The first one is Haram al-Sharif, Temple Mount. I think we are on a process that I think is so dangerous for the region because there are elements inside Israel who are trying to change the status quo by trying to achieve prayer rights for Israelis, which was not part of the status quo for Jews on Temple Mount, which at the end of the day, sometime when we achieve peace, this need to be solved, this issue. But currently, this is the source of tension that can, I said before, ignite the whole Middle East. And I think that Jordan and Israel have the responsibility to join hands together and to find solutions for this very, very detrimental point that I think sometimes is not highly enough understood in the world. The second challenge we face is the continuous annexation efforts of the current government of Israel in the West Bank. As we all know, the Abraham Accord between Israel and the peace agreement between Israel and UAE was exchange of mutual recognition and peace agreement for stopping the annexation effort of the government of Netanyahu. That was for 3 years. Since 3 years ended, this government is doing so many actions on the grounds that is bureaucratical in from some perspectives, but they are detrimental for the two-state solution because they are created facts on the ground that would be very hard to reverse. And I think this is again something, and with the new administration, a new elect president in the United States, this threat is coming back to our agenda. And I think that Jordan should be very vocal about it. And that's bring me to the last point that I think that this is a challenge for us, and that's the viability of Palestinian state and the Palestinian economy. If it will be deteriorated, Jordan might face another wave of refugees that can undermine its stability. Last point, and this is I want to end up with some hope, and that's I was in 1997. I was a citizen of resident of Bet Shemesh, and I remember late King Hussein Alay Rahmo coming to Bet Shemesh after this event with killing of the 7 pupils, girls in Naharaim, and one of them I was in her funeral because she was a student of my wife, and he came there, and we all Israelis remember his figure and his dignified way that he relate to the bereaved family when he went down and sit with them and say shared his condolences, and he was so human, which is so much needed. And we don't, unfortunately, have the same leader on our side to be human and to be, I would say, a leader like late King Hussein was. And that's my final point. We need good leaders on both sides to end up this very bad situation between the two sides and bring us to a new reality. And that's also, of course, depends on the third leader on the Palestinian side.
Thank you, Ron. Yana, over to you.
Thank you, Nimrod. So to start with, ending the war is definitely a step in the right way, but to also work on issues that security personnel on the Israeli side can move forward. For instance, renewing the auto purchase agreement. This is something that the Jordanian side has been requesting for a long time from the Israelis. And we talked about this, but nothing is moving forward. And this water, which we know is a security issue for both sides, is being held hostage. But also building new alliances and that could provide the first baby steps towards achieving stability, peace, security, that would lead to this two-state solution. We all know that this is not something that will happen tomorrow, but to take concrete steps that would lead there. For instance, looking at initiatives like the IMEC, the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, we have been pushing for adding a peace triangle to such an initiative that is moving forward, a peace triangle that would bring Jordan, Israel, Palestine to the IMEC corridor, and would ensure that we won't only have economic prosperity for all of us, but it would also push for the two-state solution, push for security, push for stability, and most importantly, the regional integration. Because whether we like it or not, we are very dependent on each other. We need each other from every different perspective we think about it. We just to add a few answers to the questions that were asked in Brood as well, we definitely need help. We cannot do it on our own. We need a US leadership, even if it's not the current administration, but at least there are good leaders in the US. We need European help, and most importantly, Gulf countries to also understand their important role and how they can help push forward to continue with a peaceful coexistence for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana, and thank you all. You know, we discuss Israel-Jordan relations, but we do that in the context of various relationships between Israel and Arab countries. And while a common thread among those relationships is a shared interest and the regional context, what we heard today on Israel-Jordan reflects the asset of a positive legacy. And even if it was short-lived, the fact that we can go back to the history of our relationship and point out to issues of dignity and respect and humanity and leadership and peace mediation. And remember King Hussein at the White Plantation Summit coming to mediate between Netanyahu and Arafat, and incentives and the role of Jordan in the devising of the Arab Peace Initiative. And even an example of a different Israeli leadership that led a rapprochement with Jordan just 2 or 3 years ago, even when there was still no dramatic progress towards a two-state solution. All that gives us a context in which there is some hope, I think, because we know what could happen. We have the good examples. We know what's the pathways to make some progress forward. And really, I thank you for being ready to talk about these issues together in such a difficult time for everyone in the region, and for the Middle East Institute for enabling and being the platform for such a dialogue. You can go on the MEI website and see videos of previous webinars and different articles on issues related to Israel and the region, including with Jordan. And again, thank you all, and thank you for the audience for being here with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.